we're here obviously at the Arnold Summit. We're here to really talk to different professionals, what they bring to the table to different trainers, different fitness entrepreneurs. So tell us a little bit about your background.
So I started in the fitness industry actually as a trainer.
Okay.
So I worked at several different gyms, and as I was training, I realized the money was an issue. Okay, so I was training, and a lot of trainers they experience this same thing, where you're training, you're working a lot of hours, but you're just making ends meet. Right? It's very hard to do so. So I actually went back and forth from training to construction. So constantly going back and forth, but I ended up hating construction. I really didn't like it, right? I don't know too many people who really love doing it. It's very hard work. So my passion was in fitness, and I wanted to continue being in fitness. It wasn't until I started with Coach Charles Poliquin, my training under him, that I really started to expand as a coach. And his training is very different, so it gave me a different set of tools that I could use with athletes.
Could you tell me a little bit about that training? What makes it different than the standard, some might think of NASM or ACE? What's the difference?
So I think Coach Charles Poliquin has very different aspects of training because he has actually world records. He has people that are really high performers and consistently high performers. He also has his own certification program called Metabolic Analytics. Most people know it as biosignature or bioprint. And that's a non-invasive testing method to determine hormonal imbalances. And how you correct those is through nutrition protocols and supplement protocols.
Interesting. So you had that kind of training.
Yes, sir.
And so what did you do with it then? Did you go back into strength and conditioning?
Yeah, so I started launching 12-week programs, and they were body composition programs. And we offered the metabolic analytics as part of the training, and we had a great deal of success with that. So his system does work. It's very effective. Yeah, and I started to actually add the ketones into it as well.
Okay. So that was it.
That was it.
So after you went there, was that where you wanted to stay at, or what was this whole thing about Pruvit? Why did you go that direction?
So at first I was a skeptic. I think a lot of people when they see, especially in the supplement industry, there's so many different things. People are wondering, is this exactly what it says it is? Are the claims actually true? Yeah. So I was a skeptic, just like a lot of people were. Yeah. And when I took the product, I noticed I felt something a lot different. I've tried every supplement there is, every pre-workout. And when I tried therapeutic ketones, I just noticed a different cognitive benefit. I was on point. I felt good all the time. My inflammation was lowered. So that was huge for me, right? So anybody who is experiencing pain and you have your inflammation lowered, your pain is lowered, that's huge. It stands out to you right away.
Okay. Now let's back up for a second.
Sure.
We talk about Pruvit. Explain to me what this whole product is. What are ketones? What is that?
Yeah, so ketones are basically a byproduct of fat metabolism. So when you're in a fat burning state, you'll create something known as a ketone. And specifically in the product, what we're talking about is beta hydroxybutyrate, which is BHB for short. Okay. And BHB is actually a fourth macronutrient: protein, carbohydrates, fats, and now ketones. So it's going to change the way that we view training and fitness in general. But it's also a signaling molecule. What that means is it tells, genes, especially epigenetics, tells good genes to be turned on, bad genes to be turned off. Okay. Yeah, inflammation is an inflammasome pathway, so it tells it to be turned off. Very effective.
Now, you're saying this is revolutionary.
Yes,
this is why didn't people know about this sooner?
It's relatively a new product, so they're very hard to synthesize, ketones. So they're a bioidentical molecule that your liver would make. Okay. It's something that's on the rise, especially. Ketosis is not new. I mean, we were in ketosis for thousands of years as hunter-gatherers. And people knew about keto nutrition a long time ago, even thousands of years. I think it has to do with a lot of industry standards. So, high carbohydrates. It's very easy to buy readily available cheap carbohydrates. Okay. So it just kind of kept us out and away from the ketogenic lifestyle.
Okay, so why, now you're saying people have been in this for thousands of years, all this stuff. What is the difference from this product that makes it easier for someone to stay in that ketogenic state or something like that?
Yeah, so most people, they assume that when you do a ketogenic diet, let's say low carb, high fat, that you're automatically going to get into ketosis. I wish that were true. It's just simply not. Anybody who's followed a ketogenic nutrition program, it's very hard.
Wait a minute, but some might say, wait a minute, Mike, you're just talking about Atkins. That's the only thing you're talking about.
Yeah, so it's a little bit different. So Atkins is slightly different than ketosis.
Okay.
The fats are a lot lower in Atkins. When you're doing a ketogenic diet, 70% roughly of your calories are coming from fats.
Okay.
So it's a slightly different. But the thing is, with insulin resistance, meaning our inability to manage glucose effectively, we cannot get into ketosis. So I myself am one of those people, which is why I was drawn to it, because I could not get into ketosis. If I overtrained, I would, mitigate a stress response, and that would not allow me to get into ketosis and feel the benefits. I was just always low carb, high fat, but not producing ketones.
Excellent. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Now, you mentioned talking about is this a factor in training?
Like, how is this effective for people who are training?
Yeah. Now, you've given us the science. For people like Mike, you've just said 20 words I don't understand. Break it down why this is effective in training, and then talking about each factor. So we'll talk about recovery time first.
Okay, so for performance, it actually increases oxygen efficiency. So at the cellular level, your cells are able to take on oxygen more rapidly and more effectively. So that's going to be huge, as oxygen plays a huge role in recovery. When it comes to things like hypertrophy, so in a bodybuilding sense, ketones actually help us become more insulin sensitive, which we all want to be. So we're naturally becoming more insulin resistant as we get older. But a bodybuilder who wants to mitigate a hypertrophy response, right, an insulin response, the more sensitive they are to insulin, the better.
Excellent.
So it'll trigger muscle growth, essentially.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about the inflammation. How can this play a factor in this?
So I'm definitely not a doctor, so I'm not making any medical claims. I was once a doctor for Halloween, but that's about it.
We don't want to talk about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Too many things.
So how they work is they turn off the inflammasome pathway.
Cool.
So there's several different pathways that work, but what they do is they're very effective at turning those off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, so now we have a basis of what Pruvit did and why it's revolutionary, the way that they have this synthetically made and produced. Now, over time, how is this actually going to be perfected or changed? Does Pruvit just put out one product and that was it?
No, so they're very good at that. So what we've noticed is we've come up with several different formulas of the therapeutic ketones. Originally, they mixed them with MCTs, medium chain triglycerides, which is a very good source of fat coming from coconuts.
Yeah.
And as they went on with their formulas, the 3.0 had a blend of amino acids.
Yeah.
And the new Keto Biomax is actually twice as available to your body, so it's more bioavailable. They also feature them with fermented leucine, so it helps prevent muscle breakdown as well.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So now that
Improving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now that we have a basis of what the product is, why you chose that, why did you think that you needed to focus on the realm of gym owners and then also other trainers to give it to them to help their clients? Why did you decide to go this way?
I think trainers play a bigger role than we imagine. I think that they definitely need to have tools. So most trainers have basic education, and they're dealing with 10 or 15 of their clients. It's very demanding on them. The other thing is they're getting paid to work per hour. So the one thing that I wanted to focus on with trainers is to have income coming from outside. A lot of what trainers do is they'll represent their supplement company around the corner, their brick and mortar supplement company, but they're not actually getting anything from it either. So instead of trainer being sponsored or something like that, this is a good way for them to have supplementary income with something they actually believe in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So give me an example, right? So and we were talking about it as we're on the floor of the Arnold's, some are having a gym, right? They've got 150 different members. All of them are asking about nutrition. What should I do? How can you make this a custom available product for them to use, but not just say, hey, pick it up at the counter, you're going to feel great. In 6 weeks, you're going to look great, you're going to feel great. What would you do to educate the trainer to start implementing it into their prescription for the client?
So first of all, Pruvit does a very good job at educating their promoters.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a lot of education coming from Dr. Dominic D'Agostino, Dr. Jacob Wilson of the University of South Florida. So that's readily available when you become a promoter. The one thing that I tell trainers is their clients trust them and they're coming to them for body composition and health purposes.
Yeah.
I can't think of a better supplement that has more bang for your buck. So
Excellent.
it's very, very effective at not only body composition, but all health issues as well.
All right, excellent, excellent. And by the way, at the end of this, if you have questions for Mike or jumping in talking about ketones, what it's about, how that affects your training, we'll be talking about that as well at the second portion.
Absolutely.
Also, you were talking about there is actually one of the bodybuilders, I just saw a booth in like aisle 100. Could you tell me a little bit who he is?
Tony Freeman.
Okay.
So Tony Freeman, he was an IFBB pro for a long time. Consistently in the top 10, and he actually lived a lot of his career in the state of ketosis. So Tony Freeman, he's for sure upwards of 40. He might even be 50 years old. He looks great. He feels great. He has a lot less inflammation than your average bodybuilder, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
It would take a toll on your body.
Yeah.
So yeah, he actually has lived in a state of ketosis, and he uses therapeutic ketones.
And what has changed in his lifestyle? He started using the product about, what was it, a year and a
Yeah,
half
about
ago?
a year, 2 years. Yeah, he was one of the original people involved. Yeah.
And then what happened since? Is it more maintenance? Does he feel better over that time? What happened?
Yeah, so I mean, we would have to ask Tony about it. I don't want
Yeah.
to put words in his mouth,
Yeah.
but he definitely feels better. And one of the things that Tony was talking about is he doesn't want to be sponsored. He doesn't
Yeah.
want to. He wants to sponsor himself. So he wants to take ownership with something that he truly believes in, which I find, that's awesome. That he can do that.
So we're going to talk about that for a second. So sponsoring yourself, we talked about also a lot of different athletes. They all try to either become ambassadors or sponsors. But the dangers with that, because number one, it's a limited contract. Number two, you're not getting most of the proceeds for it. And number three, it's not building your own personal brand. So let's talk back a little bit. So we met, was it, at the Toronto Super Show?
Yeah, the Toronto Super Show last June. Yeah.
Okay, so tell us what was going on with you and your company and what
So
what's transpired.
I was actually very new to the company at that time. So I got involved in April of last year, and we actually officially launched in Canada as of September. So we had a couple of interesting runs. We had to go across the U.S. border, get the product, pay duty on it. It was very expensive when we first started. Yeah. So it was.
Now, some people are like, Mike, that sounds really shady. What are you doing in Montana? Explain the difference between the different regulations in Canada and America, just so people know.
Yeah, so I'm sure that it differs from state to state, but in Canada, it's mainly countrywide, and it's very stringent. So most supplement companies, after they get into Canada, they can get into any other company on the planet. So it's very, very difficult to get into Canada, and that's just the way it is. There's no real specific reason for it. It's just very, very stringent.
Okay. And then so after that, that was probably in June that when you were at the show. So talk about your business, how you implemented Pruvit, and then what you saw with the growth of your involvement with the company.
Yeah, so it was definitely a lot harder when we didn't have it involved in Canada, but as soon as the gates opened, we noticed a rapid growth in our business, and we expect that with opening in Australia as well as Mexico, and then soon Europe and other countries as well. But it's a very simple process, so it's very easy and duplicatable. Anybody can do it. You don't have to be a master of business. You don't have to be a strength coach or a doctor. We always tell people not to be the message, just be the messenger. So it's very simple and laid out.
So let's talk about your brand, what you did, and going from there. So tell us what happened in June 1st. So you had your booth. You were starting there. How did it change in the next 5 months?
Well, people started taking the role that I was doing, so they're duplicating. So they were starting to book trade shows across North America, even in the U.S. We have teams all across North America. And basically, they were duplicating what I was doing. So getting out to the people that they loved and cared about and people they thought would be good for the business, and it just grew from there.
I see a couple posts, or you're very close to a lot of your clients. Could you talk about one or two different instances where you had an impact with just changing their mindset on not just using Pruvit, but nutrition and well-being in their life?
Yeah, again, I don't want to name names or whatever, but a close family friend had a very purposeful, impactful experience with taking ketones. Most people, when they take a supplement, they don't expect things in their life to change. But what we tell people is when your brain and your muscle tissue and all of your tissues in your body have that fuel source that you need, you can't believe how you can operate, how well you feel, how confident you are. And this one lady in particular, she had a remarkable experience with it. She was super busy, working over 100 hours a week, supporting her children, and just stressed to the max. So when she started incorporating ketones into her life, and obviously that helped her make lifestyle changes. They're not the be-all, end-all. They're not going to change everything for you, but if you have a catalyst for change, I think that's very powerful in our society today.
Excellent. So where do you see the company going in the next 6 months to 2 years?
So the company, what I really like about the company is the integrity. So we're actually in Tampa, and a lot of people don't realize where the research came from. So it actually came from Naval. It was funded by Naval Research, and it was for divers who have oxygen toxicity, and it was actually taken from the Johns Hopkins Foundation and the Charlie Foundation. So with kids with seizures, epileptic seizures, and when the drugs would fail, they needed to implement ketosis, but it's very hard nutritionally to do. So what they did was they actually developed these ketones. Where I see the company going is when we were in Tampa, we actually raised, I think, $30,000 to $50,000 in 30 minutes for those two organizations. So we did that as a collective in our community. One thing we tell people is, yes, it is network marketing, but we're actually community marketing. So we're actually emerging on different fronts.
Excellent. And where do you see yourself and your brand going? I know you start with Pruvit, but you also have other passions to be more holistic in health and wellness. Tell us a little bit about your passions, what you want to do in the fitness industry, and then what you want to do to transcend as well.
Yeah, so Pruvit I feel is a very good catalyst. It definitely got me off the ground. And there are things that, we had spoken about before with my company Genesis and now Biohackers University. So essentially what I'd like to do is work with practitioners, strength and conditioning coaches who are like-minded and really develop a curriculum for trainers and people who just want to learn. So essentially the role of a biohacker is just to learn things about health and wellness and fitness and incorporate them into their lives. So if we can have a proper package for people like that, I think it'd be very powerful.
Excellent. So we look forward to seeing all of your success this year, and then moving into the next couple of years, we'll be watching your progress very nicely.
Absolutely.
So thank you. Thank you for the time.
I
Now,
appreciate it.
before we wrap up and everything, we're going to be taking questions, going back and forth. So if you have questions, it's fine, or we also have 2 frequently asked questions. So anyone? Good questions? Awesome. Yes, sir.
Have you had any experience with anyone that has Hashimoto's or a type of autoimmune disease using your product and what benefits or what have you seen?
Absolutely. So we have, again, I'm not a medical doctor, so I can't personally make medical claims. Pruvit as a community, they have a Facebook page, and we have Dr. Heather Carden, Dr. Andrea Campitelli, and they go live. You can actually ask the questions there live, and they will answer it for you. The answer is yes. I just won't get into it for medical reasons, yes.
Excellent.
Usually, it's a couple of weeks to naturally kind of get yourself into a state of ketosis.
On average, yes.
And so by taking the ketones, does it put you directly into a state of ketosis, or is it just artificially, or is it temporary? So as soon as you stop taking it, will you continue to be in ketosis if you're eating that way, or does it, do you have to?
So that's a good question. So the definition of ketosis is having elevated blood ketones. So whether you got into that by ketogenesis, meaning your body's creating them endogenously, or you've taken them, technically you are in ketosis. So the remarkable thing about the product is, again, not making any medical claims, you could eat carbohydrates, not change your diet at all. Let's say you're eating carbohydrates currently, and under normal physiology, you would never get into ketosis that way, right? It's the ketones are produced when your body is calorically restricted and glucose restricted for an extended period of time. The interesting thing is these are bioidentical molecules that your liver produces. They are literally BHB. So when you take them, it tells the body it's almost like time travel. There's no time that you've gone through, but by taking the ketones, it tells your body that you're in ketosis. So off of one serving, you're roughly in ketosis for about 6 hours, is what the science shows, yeah.
Bam. Jason.
So in the presence of a regular diet with carbohydrates, fat, protein, all that good stuff, we're adding ketones to that diet with a supplement. Are the health benefits and the fitness benefits, that all exist while all the other macronutrients are currently, they're all available at the same time, right?
Yeah, so you're asking if the product actually gives you the benefits of ketosis regardless of dietary change?
Right, like we're nothing's conflicting with each other, right? Like there's carbohydrates as an example in
Yep.
the presence of ketones, and they are not in conflict with each other, and we're getting all the health and fitness benefits.
Yes, so they're actually, it's quite a good marriage there because what ketones do, when you're in a state of ketosis, one of the main benefits when you're doing it just with the diet is that it actually improves insulin sensitivity. So like I said, under normal physiology, you would never have BHB and glucose present at the same time. As soon as you put BHB in your body, it automatically tells your body, why do we have this glucose here? So it's actually glucose sparing. So for someone like a CrossFitter, there's an interesting study called What If Fran ran on fat. So it's very interesting, just showing a fat-adapted athlete versus a glucose-adapted athlete, essentially a fat burner or a sugar burner, and the effects were profound. So it's very interesting, yes. So the answer to your question is yes. regardless of dietary change, ketones still have their benefits, and they actually improve glucose sensitivity and efficiency. Yeah. Michael, yeah.
So depending upon somebody's physical activity level, like an athlete versus somebody who goes to the gym once or twice a week, would you tell them to do a different type of diet with the ketones, or is there a general consensus across the board that independent reps are telling these clients, okay,
Well, we adhere to the ketogenic lifestyle, but what I find with the general public, so trained athletes and people who go to the gym all the time and they've developed this lifestyle, it's very easy for them to make certain changes in their life. But for someone who doesn't work out, the number one thing we tell them is just to take the product and let that be the catalyst for change. That's what we're finding. Most people who can never follow a ketogenic diet in their life, as soon as they have ketones present, they're already in that state. So that transit time where you would normally cheat, right? Most people go 3-4 days and then they start to cheat, and that's really where the problem comes because they can't actually get into ketosis. So when they're taking the product, it helps keep them on track.
yeah, I was wondering, it takes
There you
like
go.
14 hours before,
Yeah.
every time I took a pee, I was peeing on this little ketone thing.
Yeah, and you're lucky. Yeah.
The other Pruvit product was very difficult, like even over anything over 5 grams of sugar in a single serving, I was getting other ketosis.
Yeah, and that'll differ with everybody. So depending on how insulin resistant you are, how much muscle you have, age, there's a lot of different factors. But the number one thing is when you do take a ketone, it works in every human being. So that's very important.
This might be a silly question, but can you overdose on ketones, or is it just you just gotta test it out?
No,
What's the answer?
no, that's a great question. So the research suggests that you're not going to increase your millimolars. So that's how you would measure your ketones. You're not going to increase your millimolars to something that's detrimental, like ketogenic acidosis. You're never going to get to that point, but it'd be pretty expensive urine at that point. Yeah. So you're basically,
I didn't know if certain athletes be like, I'm gonna take 4 packages instead of 2,
Well,
thinking that they're gonna get a greater benefit out of it.
yeah, and you could. So everybody would be different. So it's much like glucose. That's like saying if I ate 1,000 grams of carbohydrates right now, would it benefit me, or should I take 200, right? So it's the same as ketones. So I tell people, use them when you need them. So if you're going to work out, take ketones. Your body and your muscle tissue will use them much like you use glucose, but they're just more efficient. They're actually 40 to 50% more efficient than glucose.
Now, is there also a major difference on taking it on an empty stomach fasting versus taking it with food in regards to absorption or anything like that? What would you recommend?
No, because they don't pass through the liver like glucose does. They're actually independent. So they go through the blood-brain barrier and they permeate the cell. So they're readily available energy. They're in their smallest form. Glucose has to be broken down, right? So if you eat carbohydrates, it has to be broken down and then it goes into muscle glycogen. It actually passes through the liver and then into the muscle. So it's different than that. It's an immediate source of energy.
How do you take it personally? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so normally when I wake up, I take a serving of Keto Max. That's the new formula. It's the R formula, which means it's twice as bioavailable as the other formulas. I work out. I train fasted. So I myself do intermittent fasting. And I take them pre-workout with the caffeine. I take the uncharged, which is uncaffeinated, after my workout to lower inflammation and to make me more insulin sensitive. And then I might take another pack of uncaffeinated before bed. It actually really helps getting into deep REM sleep.
Excellent. Real quick, Mike, where can the people find you at? Where can they connect with you?
Yeah, so I prefer to connect on Facebook. I like it more personal. So if people want to add me to Facebook, it's just my name, Mike Masini,
How do you spell your last name?
Masini, and on Instagram at Ketogenesis Canada.
Okay, excellent. So what we're going to do is we're going to finish for now,
Yes.
but 10, 15 minutes afterwards, you can ask Mike any other questions personally. And thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate that.